Containment, firmament, comment, response. Containment, firmament, comment, response. Hello, everyone. My name is Persohn. You can contact me at pastor@mascot.church or in the comments below if you like. Now, this video is a response to one element of the conversation that have been taking place in response to my Firmament videos of last week. There'll be more coming up, and this is all part of an ongoing bit of work that I'm doing. I'll release some of these and then put some and some additional ones in a larger playlist responding to, somebody else on the interwebs. This is a very interesting topic, and this is the whole question of whether or not things are contained in the atmosphere by a firmament, by a lid, by a top, by whatever you want to call it. Now, I'm going to say to you off the top of this discussion that if you are arguing this, you are basically wasting your time. By and large, most people coming against globe earthers like me are wasting their time on the atmosphere firmament position. I'm going to show you why. And we're not talking about wasting a little amount of time, a huge amount of time. So, and I know people hate being accused of doing that, or they hate to admit that they've done something, wasted time or whatever. But I think you're going to have some things to think about today. One of the most important things to understand in any conversation is what the other side of the other person you're conversing with understands. What is their position? What is their view? In that way, if you disagree with them, you can steelman the position. That is, you can argue the position from their point, or you can identify any logical fallacies or whatever. So let's just get a bit of background here. I'm not going to run this video too long, but I have some things to prove. We're going to respond to the containment question. First of all, let's just go to a image here. Actually, the background image that I had, I'll pop these up here, is from a Star Trek episode where some aliens were contained by Jean-Luc Picard because of some bad things they had done, and they're in the containment field. You might remember the episode. Let's just go on here. The firmament position, this is an ancient or older picture. I don't know how ancient it is, probably from the last century sometime. The firmament position, the one that says that there is a physical lid on the top of the planet, usually holds that the Earth is flat and that this lid keeps everything in, and that it is impenetrable by any natural means, and that beyond it is either waters or something else or some whatever condition. Now, I responded to that by saying, yes, the Bible does talk about a firmament, but quite clearly from later texts, it demonstrates or shows that this is a spiritual division, not a natural one, not a physical one. Now, the question that we're dealing with today has to do with containment. How does stuff stay here? I wonder if you can see my mouse. Probably not. Should have given it a better tail. But how does stuff stay in the earth or on the earth if there's no lid to keep it there? Now, we did talk about the fact that as you ascend from the planet, the air gets thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner. And ultimately, by the time you get to Mount Everest, water will boil at 60 degrees Celsius. You get a little bit higher, your blood will boil. And ultimately, the air will get so thin, there's no more air left. So that kind of questions whether or not you need a lid in the first place. But their question is, well, without a lid, all this air would fly off into space. Something else that is part of this discussion usually is, well, how can there be air pressure down below, whatever, and that they'll get caught into kind of some sort of a rabbit hole. They don't ask the question about water pressure, though, which is fascinating. Notice that you can swim at the surface of the ocean quite fine, but you get deeper and deeper and deeper, and you'll be crushed by the immense pressure. What causes that? Well, of course, water on top of water on top of water, pulling down by gravity. Bam, before you get down to you get deep enough, well, you can't even send ships down there. It's just that submarines, it's that frighteningly deep. So it's a really interesting kind of failure to address one of those questions. We want to go a little bit farther, though, because I want to make the point that if you've been arguing the containment issue with globe earthers like myself, you've been wasting your time. Back to this here. Your position will be, if you hold to the physical dome position, that the physical dome is required to hold everything in, all the atmosphere in on the planet. Otherwise, it would fly off into space. You do tend to ignore the fact that the air is so thin as we get up it seems like it doesn't want to fly off into space, but that's another point altogether. One of the things that's important to do in any discussion is to look at your own presuppositions. What do I believe about what the person I'm talking to is saying? What do they say, but what do I believe about what they are saying? The presuppositions are very, very, very important, and they're hard to understand. It's hard to look at your own presuppositions. Most people who hold to the physical dome will believe that there is some, and they'll argue with people like me, right? And they'll say that there must be some mechanism for keeping everything on the planet and that we can't provide the mechanism. They keep saying things like, well, there's no way you can explain how things get contained here. Things will just fly off the edge because of the spin. They'll fly off, whatever, and you just have no way of holding things. We would be in an airless, arid, barren, dead planet if it weren't for some kind of lid, because you guys can't explain your containment. That's the general view. I'm saying, if you believe that, you're wasting your time. You're wasting your time. Well, how do I say that? Globe people like me, traditionalists like me, never, ever taught containment. We never, ever said that everything stays on the planet. That's right. Did you not hear that in high school? We never said that there was a mechanism that kept everything on the planet all the time and kept things from escaping. I'm going to show you two images, or one image of two elements here, and then we'll come back to our discussion. And this is really quite fascinating and quite enlightening. You're looking at hydrogen and helium. Hydrogen is the lightest element. Helium is the second lightest. The atomic number of hydrogen is 1. Its mass number is 1. It has 1 proton and 1 electron. Helium, it has an atomic number of 2 with a mass number of 4, 2 protons, 2 neutrons, 2 electrons. The atomic number is essentially the addition of the heavy elements, the count of the heavy particles in the middle of the element, okay? Oops, I just bumped my mic. I hope that's okay. All right, so these two elements, these are the two lightest. Now, what happens to them? They are on the Earth, or produced on the Earth, and what happens? They ascend above through the atmosphere. You know what a helium balloon does, don't you? You've seen the hydrogen blimps that were used in the Second World War and that they can float. They're lighter than air vehicles. There are helium vehicles today. I don't know that there's too many hydrogen ones, but because they are substantially lighter than air, what do? They float. Now, it's interesting that there is hydrogen and helium produced on the Earth. Not very much, but it's kind of a calculated amount as to what there is and what produces it and so on. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't stay at the surface because it's light, because it's lighter than air. It ascends just like your helium balloon, just like your hydrogen balloon. What happens to it? What have globe earthers, traditionalists, always said about hydrogen and helium? We've always said that it goes all the way up and it passes way above the air, and then it breaks escape velocity. It doesn't and goes off into space. We've always said that. Now, you better be glad that hydrogen and helium go off into space. You better. Now, I bet there's people saying, what? Yeah, you see, if you've argued the point that that we can't support our position of containment, you wasted your time. We don't have a position of containment. I'm going to say it again. If you've argued the point that we cannot support our position on containment, you're wasting your time. We don't have a position on containment. We say, no, these things are not contained in the atmosphere. How many days have you wasted? How many months or weeks have you gone back and forth on forums and that saying, these people just don't know how this works? Let me just look at the implications of the dome position here for a minute. I'm going to go back to this image, and I'm going to ask you some really, really serious questions about this. This is very curious. I'll pop over here. I'm going to just come back. Now imagine that there was a dome that was impenetrable over the Earth. Just think for a moment. If the firmament was a physical barrier that nothing could cross. Okay? What would ultimately happen to all of the hydrogen that is accumulating in the upper atmosphere? What would happen to all of the helium that's accumulating in the upper atmosphere? And what would the implications be for those of us on the Earth? There would be more and more hydrogen accumulating and more helium accumulating. And this would mean that air pressure would go up and up and up and up. You ever thought about that? Now, here's another problem. Helium is a gas that you can breathe, but it does not support life. A pure helium environment means that you would effectively suffocate. You need oxygen. If you ever played with one of those helium balloons, you take it and you inhale it and your voice is all squeaky. It's a wonderful thing, but you don't want to do it too much because you're filling your lungs with something your body cannot process. Okay, but helium is quite neutral. It's quite harmless in that respect. Hydrogen, on the other side, is fantastically explosive. If you have hydrogen and oxygen in the right mix, you ignite those things. You are talking about an explosion that is super fast. We played with it as kids. We used to take a cup and we'd put the cup upside down in salt water, and so that it would hold, the water would be held in the cup, and then we'd put electrodes on just underneath, and we'd bubble hydrogen and oxygen so that all of the water was gone with the hydrogen and oxygen. We just hold it like that, and we'd move it over a candle, and the thing would go ping like that as the hydrogen and oxygen explodes in perfect harmony. I used quite a robust cup, and I did it many times, and I noticed that my cup was cracked. And what cracked it? The impact of that hydrogen explosion. Bang! It is just so fast. All right, that was fascinating experiment my dad should never have let me do. But for today's discussion, I'm kind of glad that it happened. Now again, with a physical dome above us that cannot be penetrated by anything, the hydrogen levels would increase over time, the helium levels would increase over time, the air pressure would come down, and ultimately you'd get to the place where something would ignite the hydrogen. It would mix with the oxygen that's on the surface, and you would have an explosion to beat all explosions. Okay? So how is the planet actually designed? What's it designed to do? It's designed to hold the air. Remember, we talked about containment. Gravity holds the air, and it's designed to vent off dangerous or useless gases out into space. The question you should have been asking, rather than how do we contain everything, is what is the arithmetic that you're using to determine that helium and hydrogen fly off into space? How do you calculate the escape velocity? How come molecules of oxygen and nitrogen and the other heavy elements that make up air, how come those stay on the Earth and the others go? That would have been a reasonable question, would have taken a lot of math or physics to figure out. So here's my summary again and my conclusion. Many times people have, in good faith, come and said, well, our dome model allows everything in the atmosphere to stay on the Earth. I appreciate that. I understand. That's a good faith position. But then they've come and they've said, but those of you who hold to the globe position, you have no mechanism that allows everything to stay on the Earth. You don't have a lid. There's nothing like that. And some of us who've held this position have argued the containment point. We probably need to get our own understanding, in play, get it right as well. The point here is that by pointing to us and saying, you don't have a containment model, you basically are basing your entire kind of challenge against us on a false premise. We don't have a containment model because we do not believe in containment. We have a model that allows for unnecessary gases to be vented. What are you going to do with the unnecessary hydrogen and the unnecessary helium that's going to sit out there over time? How does the dome position work? Okay, so there you go. Have I got my point? Have I made my point? If you come to someone like me and say you don't have a model that explains your containment, you're wasting your time. We never had one. We have a model that allows for the gases like hydrogen and oxygen to escape off into space. My name is Al Persohn. I hope you enjoyed this. I'd love to see your comments on this one. And if you have been wasting your time, maybe you should use your time for something a little more productive. How's that? I'm not trying to be mean here, but it's really worth thinking about. And a lot of the flat earth discussions, by the way, fall into that. Here we go. This has been Containment, Firmament, Comment, Response. There's more to come on this wonderful topic.